All right, let's dive in. Today we're looking at sociology, and we've got this research article that I think you'll find pretty fascinating.
Definitely. Sociology, it sometimes gets a reputation for being all theory, but this deep dive really shows how it can be applied to real-world problems and lead to solutions.
Exactly. So
Yes.
this article is all about developing community resources for abused wives.
Okay.
And it's from 1980, so, a time when awareness of domestic violence was much lower than it is today.
Right.
Support systems, well, they were practically non-existent.
Yeah, this was a really different time.
It was. So we've got our sociologist, Mary C. Sengstock from Wayne State University.
Okay.
And she's put in charge of this committee to create a service plan for abused wives in a big city.
Sounds like a tough job.
A huge challenge.
Yeah.
So how does a sociologist even approach something like that?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. The article lays out 3 key strategies she used.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yes, tell me.
So first up, and this is really important, is what we call social structural analysis.
It's about looking at, the structures of society, like institutions and power dynamics, and understanding how they contribute to the problem.
I see. So not just looking at domestic violence on its own, but like how it fits into the bigger picture.
You got it. And crucially, how those structures can be used to create change.
Right, makes sense.
So Sengstock, she knew this, and when she formed her committee, she was very strategic about it.
In what way?
Well, instead of just picking people randomly, she chose people who had influence within key agencies.
Oh, smart. So like people in the police department, legal offices, social services.
Exactly. Because if you want to change the system, you need those people on board.
Yeah, you need people who can actually make things happen, not just talk about them.
100%. And she went even further. She set up these special task forces to zero in on specific aspects of the problem.
So like breaking it down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Exactly. One focused on the criminal justice system, another on counseling and shelter needs, and then one on public education.
Okay, so each group could really focus their expertise.
That's the idea. And there were these public hearings, too.
Oh, what were those for?
Well, they were actually pretty brilliant. She brought in the heads of all these agencies and made them talk about domestic violence publicly.
So kind of putting them on the spot a little.
You could say that. Remember, this is 1980. Forcing these officials to publicly address the issue was a big deal.
I bet. It kind of makes it harder for them to ignore the problem when they have to talk about it in front of everyone.
Right. It's like she engineered the situation where they had to acknowledge it and start thinking about solutions.
That's so clever. Okay, so that's social structural analysis. What's the second strategy?
Okay, so the second one is all about providing sociological knowledge.
So not just raising awareness, but actually educating people about the issue.
Yes. She wanted the committee members to really understand family violence.
What did that involve? Like giving them research papers to read?
Well, yeah, there were research articles, group discussions, even expert testimony during those public hearings.
Wow, so really immersing them in the topic.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about statistics. She wanted to debunk those myths that were holding things back.
What kind of myths?
Well, like the idea that victims were somehow to blame for the abuse.
Realize that awful victim blaming thing?
Yeah, or that alcohol was the only cause of domestic violence.
I see. So she was using knowledge to fight those misconceptions.
Exactly. It's about laying the groundwork for better solutions, ones based on evidence, not just opinions.
That makes so much sense. So knowledge is power.
Basically. In a way, yeah. Knowledge can be a powerful tool for change. But knowledge alone isn't always enough.
True. You need people to actually use that knowledge to do something.
And that brings us to her third strategy.
Okay, I'm ready for it. Hit me with strategy number 3.
This one is all about personal commitment.
Okay.
Sengstock, she understood that for change to really stick, people need to be personally invested.
I see. So not just attending meetings, but actually feeling like they're part of the solution.
You got it. She wanted the committee members to be deeply involved in creating the solutions.
So it's like a psychological thing.
Mm-hmm.
People are more likely to support something they helped build.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, it really worked.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, there are these amazing stories in the research about how some members who were initially resistant ended up becoming huge advocates for change.
That's incredible. So just by getting involved, they completely changed their perspective.
Exactly. It's the power of engagement.
Wow, this is fascinating stuff. But I'm sure there are challenges too, right?
Oh, definitely. Managing a group like this with so many different perspectives is never easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. But we'll have to save those challenges and the successes for the next part of our deep dive.
You bet. We'll be back to talk about how it all played out.
Can't wait.
Welcome back. Now, before we jump into the results, you mentioned some challenges they faced.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, trying to make this kind of social change happen, it's never going to be smooth sailing.
Right.
Sengstock's research, it actually talks about how tricky it was to manage a committee with all these different people.
Makes sense. You've got folks who are really passionate about changing things,
Right.
and then you might have some people from, institutions that are kind of resistant to change.
Exactly. It was a real mix of personalities, professional backgrounds, you name it.
So how'd they deal with that? It sounds like a recipe for, well, some disagreements, to say the least.
You're not wrong. But this is where Sengstock's leadership skills and her understanding of how groups work really came in handy.
I see.
She created this atmosphere where it was okay to disagree, as long as it was helping them move towards their goal.
So those different viewpoints, they were actually valuable.
Exactly. By having all those perspectives, they could think about potential problems ahead in time and come up with ways to get around them.
I see. So it was kind of like a built-in problem-solving mechanism.
Yeah, kind of. Like some committee members might have said, hey, this idea won't work because of this, and then the group could brainstorm a better way to do it.
That's really cool. So conflict actually led to better solutions in the end.
Exactly. Okay, but let's move on to the successes. Did they actually manage to create any real change?
That's what I'm wondering.
They did. And the impact is still being felt today. Remember those public hearings we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, they weren't just for show. They were a big reason why those agency directors had to acknowledge the problem.
Oh, I see. So those hearings were kind of like a forcing mechanism.
You could say that. They made it much harder to just sweep domestic violence under the rug.
Right.
And it worked. The committee ended up getting funding for all sorts of new programs and services to help abused wives.
Like what?
Shelters, counseling, legal aid. All these things that were desperately needed, but were almost non-existent before.
Wow, getting funding is usually the hardest part. That's huge.
I know, right? And that wasn't all. They also implemented new procedures within social services to better address the needs of abused wives.
So it wasn't just about creating new things. It was about changing how the existing system worked.
You got it. They understood that if you really want to make a difference, you have to change the system from the inside out.
That makes sense. But tell me more about those training programs for professionals.
Oh, yeah. That was one of their biggest wins. They created these programs to teach judges, police officers, social workers how to deal with domestic violence effectively.
So giving them the tools and knowledge they needed to make a real difference.
Exactly. And it's incredible to think that all of this came from just one committee, led by a sociologist with a vision.
It really is a testament to what's possible when you combine sociological thinking with, action.
Right. It's like sociology isn't just about studying society. It's about figuring out how to improve it.
100%. But this was back in 1980. What can we learn from this story today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And how can those strategies be used to address the problems we face now?
That's what we're going to talk about in the final part of our deep dive. So stay tuned.
We're back and ready to wrap up our look at how sociology tackled domestic violence. And honestly, it's pretty inspiring to hear about what Sengstock and her committee achieved.
It is, right. Like, social problems can feel so huge and overwhelming.
Right.
But this story shows us that even back then, with limited resources and awareness, they made a real difference.
It shows that change takes time, though.
Definitely.
It's not instant. You need to be patient and persistent and really understand the social structures involved.
And that's where sociology is so valuable.
Yeah.
It gives us a framework for analyzing those structures, finding those points where change is possible, and then figuring out how to make it happen.
When I think about those three strategies, the social structural analysis, providing the knowledge, and getting people personally committed.
Yeah.
Do you think those could apply to other issues we face today?
Absolutely. In fact, I think they're more relevant than ever.
Real.
Think about something like climate change. We can use sociology to look at how social norms and economic systems and even political structures all contribute to the problem.
And then use that knowledge to push for policies or develop new technologies or even just change people's behavior.
Exactly. It's like taking Sengstock's approach and applying it on a global scale.
Wow, that's a big thought. What about something like inequality?
Same thing. Sociological research can help us understand why these disparities exist, like in wealth, or education, or healthcare.
So we can see how those systems create and maintain those inequalities.
Yeah, and then we can work to change those systems and create more fairness for everyone.
This deep dive has really made me see sociology in a whole new light.
Me too.
It's not just about studying the world, it's about understanding how we can make it better.
It's like a call to action.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, What social issue gets you fired up? What change do you want to see?
Good question.
Think about those strategies.
Yeah.
Analyze the structures, learn everything you can, and get involved.
Make your voice heard?
Because you don't need a degree in sociology to have a sociological imagination.
You said it. Just be curious, ask questions, and don't be afraid to challenge the way things are.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep pushing for that positive change.